Welcome back to the Disenfranchised Podcast. I am your host, Travis Gearhart. Keith is on sabbatical. Actually, we're recording this earlier than we normally do, so he's still at his regular 9-to-5 job. But as usual, we do, that doesn't matter. We're still good to go. So, Ken Good, he is on the board of directors for the Professional Bondsmen of Texas. Graduated from Hardin-Simmons University in 1982 with a Bachelor of Arts degree. He received his Master of Education in 1986 from Tarleton State University, a part of the Texas A&M system. In 1989, he received his law degree from Texas Tech School of Law, where he was a member of the Texas Tech Law Review. He's argued many cases in the Supreme Court of Texas and Texas Court of Appeals, and they reached out to us to talk to us about a recent issue that happened right down the road from us here in Chicago and kind of talk about it. So, Ken, thank you so much. I appreciate having you on.
Well, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to talking to you. You've got a lot of insider knowledge. I want to know what the people are thinking about all this Safety Act, which doesn't seem to be too safety.
Yeah, well, give us the background, with all that, because we haven't on the show, we haven't discussed it in the past, but just so everybody knows kind of the nuts and bolts of it.
Well, sure. Probably several decades before the Safety Act, or maybe a decade before the Safety Act, the state got rid of the private surety bail industry. And, that's probably about the time crime started going up. And so all this publicity that we've heard about the Safety Act getting rid of bail, they've really gotten rid of cash bonds or paying, a percentage to the courts. And over time, the courts were relying upon people's failures to appear to pay part of their operating costs. And so when they got rid of what was left, cash bonds, where you could pay the whole cash bond to the court or a percentage of the cash bond to the court, then that really just left simple release, whatever you call it in Chicago. In New York, they call it release on no bond. In California, release on zero bail. In Texas, they would call it release on a personal bond. So whatever the equivalent, you get released or held. And simple release means I give you my promise, a solemn promise, I'm going to come back. And that's really it. That's the accountability. The problem with that is it has such a high failure to appear rate that it just creates chaos, because you can't hold everybody accountable that fails to miss court when you've got 50, 60, 70% or 80%. There was some statistics from Cook County where the clerk released them saying they were having a 70, 75% failure to appear rate for people supposed to attend court. And the critics just said, oh, that can't be right. No, we're seeing that kind of statistics across the country. In Harris County, there's 2 years worth of data where it's like an 83% failure to appear rate. I did a podcast with a DA in California, and he said all misdemeanors are simple release now, and those have about an 80% failure to appear rate. So these simple release mechanisms create chaos from people, these experiments that fail. And I think Chicago and Illinois is reaping the benefits. I mean, not the benefits, reaping the chaos that all this has done. And I want to know, what is the public saying about, the Safety Act? I know there's been a few calls to change it.
Yeah.
But there needs to be a lot more. But the problem is, once the politicians stick their neck out like they have, they can't admit it's not working. So that's part of the problem. You can't admit the chaos is their fault.
Right. Well, and so to me, I just always try to reverse engineer it. So what was the thought process behind the Safety Act? Right. So the thought process, and I'm just spitballing and guessing here on just the cost of going after criminals, right? I know that everybody's on a budgetary.
No, it was not.
Was that not really the issue?
The problem was a perception that the racial makeup of the jail was the result of systemic racism, and so we had to address that, and we had to reduce the number of people being held in jail, and that would address historic racism. The problem is, I don't think initially the jail population went down, but that all went down because they changed a lot of crimes to just a citation. So instead of arresting you, just get a ticket. Well, that has a terrible failure to appear rate. But of the people left in the jail, still has the same racial makeup. So I would say they pushed the Safety Act because of activists pushing the politicians. And so it was on a premise that turned out not to be true.
I gotcha. And how much of this too? So what sort of things are they giving citations down to? Because I know in particular, with what issue we're we were looking at had to do with this gentleman that was a violent, I mean, how many of these are violent versus, because I think, looking at a failure to appear rate, yeah, and trying to make sure that you're in a lawful society without a doubt. But then I always kind of have to look back and say, well, if we have so many laws on the books that everything's illegal, you know what I mean? How many of that is the case? You know what I mean? I guess that
Oh,
would be
but
my
those are two
question about the
different things.
percentage.
Those are two different things. I
Yeah.
mean, do we need to review our laws and decide that we've overcriminalized some things? Maybe. I don't know if I would even agree with that. But when we focus only on violent offenses and then we quit, enforcing most misdemeanor laws because we've given up on them because we've created a system of just too much chaos so we can't. The problem with that is two things. First of all, today's misdemeanors are the training grounds for tomorrow's felonies. And then second of all, career criminals, organized crime gangs, they learn how to just make a fortune off of, low-level crimes. You got to couple this like in Illinois, in Chicago, and our other areas where we get these soft on crime DAs. And so, they treat any, drug charge the same. They quit seeking enhancement. So if I'm a drug dealer and I get caught with 20 pounds of meth, I'm going to get treated as someone and, organized crime sees that if you're going to do that, they see that as just a cost of doing business. Great. I'm going to spend 2 weeks in jail instead of 30 years. I mean, and what happens is, like there was a report somewhere, where was it? I can't remember. But they found that 65 individuals were responsible for 5,000 different charges being filed on the subway. So those would all be low-level offenses. But, I mean, we've got a small group of people committing 60% of the crime, and so we can address that, but we're choosing not to because of extreme politics.
Yeah, and so so one of the things that I had always read and seen, and again, I'm outside of the system by all means, is that a lot of times too, going to jail for extended periods of time, like you kind of talked about a training ground, is the opportunity where you can get arrested for, obviously in Illinois, marijuana is legal now, but how many people are still sitting or were arrested because of something that ended up becoming legal? You know what I mean? So that's kind of one of the things that I had read about and seen in different documentaries. And again, I'm just, correct me if I'm wrong that's not really the case. But I mean, everything I've seen, even in, people go to talk about going to jail for smaller level crimes and then end up getting hooked up with a gang. You see documentaries of people that go in and don't really know anything, and they're kind of required to shack up with whatever their race is so that they can survive prison. So, I mean, we know that the prison system, and it's designed that way. It's not designed to give you a good time, so I mean, I guess
Well,
that's part of the
isn't
reason.
that a argument that essentially says the government is so bad at everything it does that it will make it worse by holding you accountable for committing a crime? So we should not hold anybody accountable for committing a crime? I mean, that just seems like we're building off of all of the failures of the government and saying, well, the government's such a big failure. Families have failed, schools have failed, inner cities have failed, the drug war has failed. And so we should we should give up on fighting crime because the government does such a bad job at it. And
No, certainly
I would
not
even
with
argue
sorry.
there's courses being taught in colleges about the economics of crime. There's a lot of crimes. It costs too much for our treasure, too much for our manpower to fight. And so they would argue that, what Trump is doing in the Gulf of America, Gulf of Mexico, whatever you want to call it, is too much because of the economics of it. And so I think that kind of goes with that argument.
Well, and I would and I'm inclined to lean more in that direction because I do think that blowing up boats without due process is wrong. I'm not in favor of that by any stretch. Yeah, I absolutely think that those courses are right, and I think they're moving along with the general with generally where we're going. And I think
Wait,
Where I think
but
where the disconnect
but I
is,
like to
real
when
quick.
you say
The
that.
disconnect here real quick, hold on 1 second. The disconnect here real quick is that you're saying that we should treat the minor offenses just as bad as the main offenses when it comes to that sort of thing. I don't have as much of a problem like in the example given, when you reached out to me and you brought up this Alfonso Talley issue where he was pending violent felony charges. Absolutely. I think that you should make sure that you take that very seriously. And I think, unfortunately, where I absolutely agree with you is that there is certain judges in certain areas that don't make that distinction, right? So they're taking the violent ones and they're putting them in the same category as nonviolence criminals and saying, all right, let's push them through the system. Let's not worry about, let's pass this legislation that makes it so that we don't have to, we treat them the same way. And they're not the same, right? So, but yeah, so I do think that it's spending more time, but again, for me, I look at it on the front end, on the political side. Yes, absolutely. I think we are way too many laws in society. I mean, there's still some laws on the books in some states that you can't marry, I mean, pick something. Like there's all kinds of laws that are still on the books that need to be taken off. And yeah, I do think that we're a society that we shouldn't have as many laws as we do. But regardless, on the front end of that, yeah, so right before yeah. So if you want to continue on.
Well, I don't remember what you were saying, but I wanted to take your argument and then just take it out logically to the end of it. And I like to do that sometimes where,
Mhm.
people are saying, well, we should be more forgiving. And I don't have a problem with being forgiving. What I have a problem, especially if someone has shown that they're contrite and they're going to be a productive citizen. But I would argue that the procedures we're setting up, the processes we're setting up are doing the exact opposite. We're not looking for people who will change. We're looking to be more fair and to treat everyone the same. The problem is first-time offenders and people with a 3-year criminal history of, 30 crimes should not be treated differently. And our
No,
whole
I agree.
criminal justice system is built on what pressure you need and what pressure I need to be turned around and become productive is different because, I may be pig-headed, you may not be. I may be a first-time offender, you may not be. You may be a member of organized crime. And so, but we're setting up procedures, especially in our nonviolent offenses, where we're doing charge-based releases, where everybody that gets charged with this crime gets treated the same, even if one is a first-time offender and one has a 10-year criminal history and is a member of a gang, organized crime, and they're like catalytic converter theft. That's a great example. We've we've had a time period where people have tried to decriminalize it, and gangs and organized crime and career criminals have figured out ways to make millions of dollars out of it. And so we're kind of going back to criminalizing it. And somebody that a first-time offender that steals a catalytic converter should not be treated the same as someone who's been arrested 10 times for catalytic converter theft. But
No,
on
absolutely.
these soft on crime areas like Chicago, they would be.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you on that. I mean, I think that, yeah, I think that has to be taken into account. And unfortunately, some of it does kind of come down to money. We all have had people that and read articles where somebody is able to get, oh man, they got this lawyer, so, in a system where, you get yourself a lawyer that's able to curry favor with the judge and has a good relationship and all that, that's a part of, from my understanding of where some of those different, somebody's kid gets their fifth DUI and you wonder why they're not spending any time in jail. Well, their dad's friends with a senator.
Well, but is
You
that
know what I
true,
mean?
or is that just what we're being told now to always undermine the system, always second guess what's going on? Because, someone who's the governor's son, they're like, oh, well, he's getting preferential treatment. And so is he, or does he have, I mean,
Usually.
you can argue both ways. I mean, that's the beauty of being an attorney, but you could say, look, they have opportunities. They have a better chance of turning themselves around. But then at the same time, politics, you could say, oh, it's just because he's the governor's son. It's just because they can afford any lawyer, or any lawyer will represent him because they they want to curry favor with the governor. And so, but again, our criminal justice system is based upon two people should not be treated the same. People should be treated individually. So whatever amount of pressure is needed to turn them around to be productive. The problem is we're not looking for pressure on anybody in our soft on crime areas, especially Illinois right now. We're looking just to get the cases out of the system and get people out of jail. And, when you release more criminals, you get more crime. But I have a question for you. I mean, my perception in Chicago is that Chicago is really run by gangs. Where am I wrong?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, that's a fair perception. I mean, I was in Chicago, because I live right outside of the city. Obviously, I'm in Chicagoland. I don't live right in the neighborhood, but I mean, we went into the Cobra Lounge, and I will say that it's like anything else. There is you don't. There's certain parts of the city you just don't go to, right? And so in the parts that aren't in that vicinity, mostly on the south side. Yeah, that's something, that's a decision you have to make about going there and going there during daylight and all that. So yeah, there's definitely an element of that, like there is in all cities, and I don't disagree.
I don't think there's that in all cities. I don't. I mean, now maybe in our large areas there are areas like that, but I don't think anywhere in the United States it's to the extent like it is in Chicago.
Well, I think you look at size. I mean, Chicago is larger, so the kind of crappier parts are larger.
Yeah, but where else in the United States do you hear when it's election time that politicians are talking to gangs about getting out the vote and stuff like that? I mean, I don't hear that anywhere else.
More than I'd like. Los Angeles, St. Louis is kind of known for being a little in that realm. What's the one down in Louisiana? I mean, I've heard that, I mean, again, it's living right outside of Chicago. Trust me, it's amplified out here. I'm not waving the.
So what's the solution for that? Just not, I mean, because, the areas you don't go into, there's somebody running those areas. There's someone police them. They're not, the government, and they're probably not doing it on the standards that we would want it to, because they're doing it on their own standards. They're looking out for themselves. But what's the solution the solution can't be we're no longer going to fight crime. I mean, that's, we're not going to do an economic solution. Well, we can't go into that area anyway, so we're just going to turn that over to who's getting hurt in that situation? The very minorities that these activists say they want to help. When we give up on crime and say these are no-go areas, well, the poor get stuck there. It's these same minorities that are trapped. And so what's their alternative? Win the lottery?
Well, yeah, basically. I mean, looking at the socioeconomically, how do you fix that? I mean, that's something that America's been dealing with for a long time. It's definitely worse now, but I'd argue it's worse now because of the way the economy is. I mean, it's very much a top-down economy. The middle class is shrinking. I do feel like there's a lot of cronyism that goes on. I don't feel like it's much of a free market. I think that we give away too much money, and I think that all kind of trickles down into it. I think that's that's looking at the forest for the trees, kind of. How do you get more people to get out of the ghetto? Well, how do you get more people to stop using drugs? Well, you create an economy where you have more people that are working, and you look at that from a top down approach.
Well,
I don't think going into a neighborhood with a gun and saying stop doing drugs when they've been addicted for 20 years, do I think that, yeah, if you caught them stealing their 6 catalytic converter and they're on drugs, I know here in Northwest Indiana, there's a couple of, actually, I'll shout out to him because he's very proud of it, is Chris Buckley here in Northwest Indiana has done a lot of alternative means approaches, like, hey, let's get you, let's and like you said, if it's the 6th time and they've burned all those bridges, absolutely. Do you get out of here? You've made your bed, go sleep in it. I think you're going to have those for sure.
Yeah, but we're not doing that. We're not doing that. Just you and I agree we should be, and we're not.
Yes. No, I absolutely agree with you that once you've gotten to that point, you know what I mean? I'm just saying that, that I'm not against alternative, means.
But let's talk about
I think we have too many people in jail as it is.
Well, let's talk about the drug issues. I think, that's a good point, a good area where we probably could find common ground, Oregon decriminalized all hard drugs for a period of time. And they spent a whole bunch of money setting up programs, counseling, all treatment. And I mean, I think less than 0.001% of people took advantage of all those programs, and instead they started having record numbers of overdoses every month. And it got so bad that when it came time to renew this little experiment, the public said no. And so what that kind of highlights is when you take the threat of going to jail or going to prison out of a drug charge, then your drug problem gets worse. And so what we need, the programs, the treatment stuff, but we need the hammer of, okay, you've been arrested for illegally using drugs. You have two choices. You can go to rehab or you can go to prison. And we have to have the hammer because rehab has such a high failure rate. I mean, you go to rehab, it doesn't work. You go to rehab, it doesn't work. You go to rehab, it doesn't work. So we've got to keep having that hammer to give them an incentive to go back until it finally works. And then you're going to have the benefit of that. But when you remove the hammer of it, I think the Oregon example just shows you that, excuse me, I've got to decline a call.
Oh,
I think the Oregon example just shows you that if you take away the hammer of the criminal justice system in the drug charges, then no one will seek treatment. And that just means the drug use will increase and overdose. I mean, your police will spend all their time trying to revive people from overdosing on drugs. And then what do? Then the next day they line up for their next hit. That's not a productive society. I mean, we're giving up on a generation when we do that. I would rather fight for that generation, even if it means you have to choose between going to prison or going to rehab.
Yeah. See, and this is where, because I do believe that the war on drugs has not worked. It just hasn't. I mean, we've been at war on drugs since the 80s, and here it is 2026 and drugs is winning.
Well, do we say that, or do we say, I mean, can we really say that, or would we be much worse off today without the war on drugs? I mean, look at what Trump is doing in the Gulf. I mean, fentanyl. The amount of fentanyl coming into this country has gone down. Fentanyl deaths have gone down noticeably since that program. So I would say what the president has done, or what the administration has done, has had a very positive impact on drug deaths as a result.
Are you talking about blowing up the boats?
Yes, sir.
Well, see, I totally disagree. I think fentanyl deaths have gone down due to awareness. Those boats didn't have fentanyl in it. That fentanyl does not come from there. They don't come from Mexico. They don't come from South America. Fentanyl comes from China. Fentanyl comes from,
but it comes from China. It goes through Mexico into the country, and so closing the border has decreased
what our own information said, though. That's our own information.
That is true, because the Chinese are the provider to the cartels in Mexico of the elements of fentanyl that they need, and they're the ones providing it to the cartels in Mexico.
So those fisher boats that are first of all, you're not moving enough product to be running, and even if a very, very small amount comes from it, there's all kinds of reports that absolutely say that is the absolute opposite of what you're saying. So even if those little boats had fentanyl on it, there was enough fentanyl to kill maybe 1,000 people on those boats. Not saying that that's an okay thing, but you know what the nice part about blowing somebody up is you don't get a chance to talk to them about it afterwards. So we don't actually know what's on that. The government's lied to us about several things very recently that makes me think, well, maybe those aren't fentanyl boats.
What was the most recent lie the government made to us?
The Epstein files are sitting on my desk. There's no such thing as the Epstein files. Iran had nuclear bombs. Those are 3 within 30 seconds.
I mean,
and
I don't think I've heard anybody say Iran had nuclear bombs. I've heard people say they were close to making
that they were 2 weeks away. I'm sorry. Yeah. Since 1960, they've been 2 weeks away. And then we blew up their facilities in July of last year. And
you don't think that was a good thing?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I don't think that was. We're very different on this. I don't think it was a good thing. I don't think we should have funded it. I think it has hurt our economy now. They've closed the Strait of Hormuz because of that. So I think that, I think faulty information has gotten us involved in some real conundrums.
Well, I
I
think
mean,
the
you talked
jury's still
about,
out on what's going on in Iran because we're in the middle of this little conflict, and so I think it will still play out. We'll see. I mean, you could be right on that.
I don't
I
know if
mean,
I'd call it a little conflict in the sense that, have you seen, how much did it cost you to fill your car up?
I just filled it up yesterday. I'm driving
Yeah.
across the state of Texas today, so
I remember when Trump had his State of the Union
I
address, he was
seem to
bragging
think,
about a
though, it's
dollar
still high.
ninety
I mean,
gas.
it's probably comparable to what it was under Biden, so, I mean,
I'm with you. I don't like either of 'em.
but
But, like,
Trump
that's what I'm
I
saying,
mean,
though.
Biden was, taking from the oil reserves just so he could win an election, and then after the election, gas went up to probably what it is now. Trump's like, "Pump, drill, baby, drill," and gotten oil down, and then the conflict with Iran has started. And
Yes.
so prices have gone back to where they were.
So it
I
doesn't so it
d
doesn't really matter
Well, but
then,
the
the
problem is
first
you
stuff.
don't
If
hear
if
from
if
the
you're doing the second stuff, the first stuff doesn't matter.
Well, but you don't hear from the problem is when everything is politics, you don't hear any complaints when Biden's oil prices are what they are now, and
I
now
complain.
the same
That's
people complain that the oil prices are back to where they were because it's
Well,
all
I'll give you
politics.
most of them are old Democrats, but this is absolutely a generational thing, man. All the Democrats absolutely complained about Biden. All the Republicans absolutely complained about Biden. Everybody that I know around 45 to younger is getting out of this Biden versus Trump thing. That's not really an argument to us anymore, right?
What do you
So
mean?
if
What do you
you've
mean
got
it's not an argument? Biden versus Trump's not an argument anymore. What do you mean by that?
because everybody's saying in our generation is saying, I don't care about Biden versus Trump. They both suck. They both have done all kinds of things. Again, I can go over the list for
So
the
then who
next
can
20
you
minutes
trust going
about it.
forward? If Biden and Trump both
We're trying to figure
suck,
that out.
who do you support? Because there's going to be somebody running the country. I mean,
Yes.
if Biden runs as a moderate and then governs as a far left, I mean, who
And then
can
and then Trump ran as a libertarian and then ended up
Trump
becoming basically a
pretty much has
neocon.
done everything he said he would do, but
Not true.
we're equating them and saying they're both bad.
Well,
So
hold on a
how
second.
do we
That's not true though.
evaluate the next
Doge
Democrat? I
got
mean,
the
look at Virginia. The governor of Virginia ran, swearing she was a moderate, and then when she got elected, she ran as a far left governor. So how can you trust any Democrat saying I'm going to be a moderate? How can you trust them to do that in this day and age? Because it seems like you have to say that to be elected, and then once you're elected, you go to the left because the activists in the party will not support you. I don't see that from the right. I don't see that.
What was the rights absolutely do it. I mean, Trump ran in here saying no new wars. He promised Doge. He promised to drain the swamp. He promised to have the Epstein files released. Those are all things that were not campaign
I
campaign
think the
promises that did
Epstein
not come
files is
true.
just a rabbit trail created by the Democrats. If that was an issue that implicated Trump, they would have released that during when they had control instead of after Trump was elected. That's the only time it became
That's
an issue
because
with
it's
the
an issue
Democrats.
for both sides. There are Democrats and Republicans in those Epstein files. So yeah,
You don't think that they
that's
have
not a
released?
Democrat.
You don't think they've released a crap load of stuff on the Epstein stuff
They
now?
have, and there was a crap load of things that were very concerning that were in it, and then it makes you wonder, well, what's in the other half? Because they've only released half, man.
Well,
They were all that's the truth.
I
If
don't.
this is the stuff that actually got released,
Okay.
then what's in the other half?
So okay. And so now we have two parties where one is doing false advertising when they run and then run policies on the different. But then the other side, they don't like that guy so much that they encourage people to try to kill him. How many times has we have had an attempted assassination? Are we up to 4 now?
Okay.
We're okay with that?
Yeah,
We're okay with that?
I'm not okay with attempted assassination on anybody. I don't
I don't see
it would be
that being
great.
done.
I would love to have some more information
Okay,
about
but
those
in
attempted
politics, the way you
assassinations, but
people
they haven't put anything in fact, they closed off speaking of the
But
assassinations,
the way you hold
what
people
are they doing?
accountable in politics is you don't vote for them for stuff like that. But that's not happening. We're now in a period of here's what you're saying. Both parties are bad. They're
Yes.
equal bad. So
Yes.
I can vote for whoever I want. So someone who encourages their supporters to try to commit suicide or try to assassinate somebody. Run is one thing, govern is another. We don't hold them accountable. We don't defeat them. We don't vote
Who's
against them.
accusing who of trying to commit of trying to
I've said
kill the president? There have been, I mean, there might have been some crazy leftists that, yeah, absolutely call for Trump to be killed. I've
You
seen,
don't think the rhetoric has
I
been
was in the
so
Republican
bad?
Party for 12 years. I think there's been lots of rhetoric on both sides. Is there maybe on the far left a little bit worse rhetoric? Without a doubt, sure.
Absolutely.
But there's been
But
listen. I know plenty of
wait
righties
a minute. Wait a minute.
that are right now digging holes, like
Wait a
looking
minute.
to
So
bury
when
their
you
guns.
admit that
Right.
the far left's rhetoric is worse, I mean, will don't will you agree that I mean they're pretty much running the party right now, the activists, because if you don't
What
do
far left candidate did they elect? That's most of my
what's the
far
guy
left
from
buddies that
Maine
I
that has the
disagree with.
Nazi tattoo and all the stuff about child predator
He's
websites and
not a
all that?
Nazi. That wasn't even true.
So
It
it's
wasn't
not
a
true.
Nazi
It's not a
tattoo.
Nazi tattoo. Oh my
And he
god!
got it covered up as soon as he realized what it was.
After he
I'm
had
just
it for
saying that,
15 years?
yeah. Do you have any tattoos? Have you
I
ever gotten
don't
anything?
know. I don't. I have
It's
no
one of those things
tattoo.
where you can go and you can pick something out and even if it wasn't, you know that the Nazi symbol didn't start off as a symbol of hate. Like it actually is from a lot of stuff. So a lot of symbols end up getting adopted by different gangs and different Nazi associations. So you can have a tattoo that then gets adopted by a Nazi association and realize, oh shit. And then he went and got it
I mean,
covered up and
he's a
said, hey,
problem.
I mean,
He's a problem for his party, and the rumors going around is he won't be the candidate for much longer. And I saw an article today saying there's rumors that there's a worse scandal than the Nazi tattoo to come out. I mean, you don't.
there very well could be.
He's not an
I have no idea.
example. I mean, they had they had two choices. One, I mean, and this is a great example of what we're seeing in our country right now. We had a vetted, someone who was established candidate, someone that would have given the party a great chance of winning, and we had an unknown that was probably a good speaker. But and I would say the activists are going out and nominating people that are good speakers but who will do whatever they tell them to do. And I think that's what he was and what he is. And so, I mean, you can see AOC is probably goes in that category. She's a very good speaker. Mamdani is a good speaker, but has no experience. And he's saying, "Oh, I've balanced the budget." Well, he balanced the budget by going to the state, and the state gave him so many billions of dollars. If they'd have given Eric, whatever his name was, that same amount of money, I mean, it's just all politics.
You would have done the same thing.
Yeah.
Well, and so real quick, let me interject because I agree with you on all of the things that you're saying about why the Democrats and why the lefties aren't what they're cracked up to be. But you have to realize that, again, people are starting to get real sick of the usual back and forth between the left and the right. So they voted for Imam Dani, who ran as a populist candidate, who ran as a person that's going to come in and do things completely different. And even though they tried to kind of use the anti-Israeli card against him, a lot of New York, which is predominantly Jewish, voted for the guy. And so, no, I don't agree with everything. And I agree with you. He balanced the budget by getting a $1 million loan. I agree with you on the premise. But then my question is what are the Republicans going to do to start to not also just be big spending, basically socialists? You got the big, beautiful bill that was passed it absolutely ran us down the path of insolvency. You've got how many different associations across the world have to talk about not using the U.S. for the petrodollar, U.S. currency as the backup. Those are all things that are on the precipice, and we have a government that, regardless of Democrat or Republican, isn't doing anything about it. And the only people that were talking about it just had $20 million spent against him to kick him out of his seat in Kentucky.
Well, let's just bring it back to crime. We're here to talk about crime, and I mean, I would hope that we would at least acknowledge that the ICE crackdown in some of our big urban cities have had positive impacts on crime, because it turns out when you have foreign governments empty their jails and send them to the United States, that's not a good thing for those communities where those people go. I mean, that was an issue that was raised during the campaign by Trump. I'd never heard it before. In fact, I said, that can't be right. And suddenly we start hearing about it. And I would say everything we've heard since the election has proven it to be true. And I think his actions, there's a mayor in Tennessee that is a Democrat mayor that worked with the government. And I would even the mayor of D.C. Turned around and said those actions had a positive impact on crime. And so I would say, Trump think about this. In our urban areas, those aren't people that vote Republican. I mean, if you're looking for a measure, there's a guy right there that said this is the right thing to do and did it, knowing that that's really, I mean, is going to have a very small impact on the next election. And I don't see any other politician doing that right now. In fact, I see them saying they're going to do one thing and then once elected do the opposite. And so when I'm trying to compare, I mean, I don't see two groups acting the same and we have to say they're equivalent. I see one that's like you even acknowledge, one that's not ready for prime time. They're not ready to govern. And so I only see one group right now ready to govern, and to everybody else flailing around and calling them criminals to try to do exactly what you're saying, to equate them so that for the next election, it makes it easier to vote for them when they have no plan. And what they'll try to do is actually harm the country because they're going to follow what the activists tell them to do, not what's good for the country. They won't admit what they're doing is not working. That's the biggest problem in the criminal justice area.
Yeah. See, in the short term, I obviously, being able to have more police presence, you end up knocking some crime down. I think I think that ICE is in the long term actually hurting us to have any sort of real immigration reform. And here's why. We can all agree that during the Biden administration, the door was left wide open. You had all kinds of illegals, both ones that just wanted to come here for work and ones that were here because they were criminals that were sent from outside taking without taking the first part, which would be if we didn't go to so many foreign wars, they wouldn't send their immigrants here. Without taking even that into account, Trump basically closed down the border. I didn't like the way that ICE operated. I think you can deport people without having to show up in a mini tank outside and cause so much uproar, right?
You
And
can by working with the local officials. So when they're arrested and released, they get turned over to ICE. But that
and
wouldn't
some of that
happen.
is an issue, and that's part of why they had to do it, is because none of the local officials wanted to work with them. And so this is where I do find myself less libertarian in that respect. There are libertarians that are much more on the left with that sort of thing, and that's not. I'm kind of somewhere between. I think that there's a way you can do it. I think that because everything that has been done so far has not been done through Congress. So whoever goes in there next is going to wave their magic wand as the president and do away with anything that Trump
Wait
has
a
made as an
minute. How did
executive
go through
order.
Congress? All Trump is doing is enforcing the laws that Congress enacted, which were not being enforced under Biden. So, I mean, didn't go through
I'm talking
Congress.
about pushing ICE in different directions. I'm talking about the policies, the enforcement of the policy. The next president can come in and just not enforce.
Well,
And as we've
it's
seen
what
that
Biden
happen.
did, yeah.
Yeah.
But the problem
Yeah.
is
So
Biden
so
lost because the
that's where
public wouldn't
Congress
stand
needs
up
to
for
do.
that. And so the public's not going to stand up for not enforcing. So, but what you're saying is true. Well, the next Democrat running for president will say they will enforce the immigration laws, just like, the Virginia governor candidate said she was going to not redistrict. And then when she was elected, she was redistrict. And so just like Biden said, just like Obama said, we're a country of laws, and if you're here illegally, we're going to remove you. That was true until the last year of his presidency, and then Biden comes in and he just stops enforcing. Now, why? Why did Biden, who's always been a law and order person, stop enforcing immigration laws? I mean, you could come up with a bunch of theories, and we're going to find out over time. It could be just the activists were running the chicken coop, but I think that's, I don't know. You could argue they had something on him, and so that he had to rule from the far left. I think he had some, you know what? He probably wasn't all there, and he shouldn't have run for president, but he was the guy that was the moderate to be elected. And so they ran him, even though he was a scarecrow. And so they knew.
They definitely weekend at Bernie's him. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, they weakened at Bernie's. But so it's going to be difficult, but it's going to be difficult for me to even trust, a candidate saying they're going to be law and order when they've never been law and order in the past. Newsom from California. I mean, can anybody trust him in saying, I'm going to enforce, I'm going to keep the border closed? I don't think anybody would believe that.
Yeah. Listen, I'm with you. I don't know. I can't think of any Democrats that I want to see win, but I also think that if you're electing Republicans foolishly thinking they're going to do a lot with that,
Yeah.
I think that that's wrong.
Well, you know what? I
You know
don't.
what I mean?
I don't think that I disagree with that to a certain extent. But here's my point. My point is, historically, both national parties have been law and order parties. And, in the 60s, we had, one party kind of got out of kilter, and we had the backlash of the war on drugs, and we got Reagan elected. And I think we've kind of gone through that again. We need one more national election where people vote law and order. And then if they do that, then both national parties, the one that's out of kilter, will reset and be like it historically has been, law and order. And then we can get back to these other issues where we're voting, on other issues, and we can fight over those because we'll all agree on law and order. I think it takes one more election to reset both parties to be law and order parties. So I think we need one more. And so I don't disagree with you, what you're saying, but I think we've got to, we have to have law and order. That's one of the reasons why I've been very hopeful. All these changes that have not worked, they're just not sustainable. And I do believe that's one of the reasons why we got Reagan. Not Reagan. That's one of the reasons why we got Trump. Trump was elected because immigration policy got out of whack, and also crime policy got out of whack. And you can see him resetting it. And I think, we have to at least admit some, if not a lot, of what he's doing has been very positive.
No, some has, without a doubt. Again, I always take it back then to the next step. Well, why are we having more crime? Why is this going why is this going up? And I do blame a lot of it on the way that the economy is
crime is going down.
I'm just saying it goes up when you have a growing bottom and a growing top, and you're getting rid of the middle class. You're bringing in all these AI. You got the data centers that are coming in that are displacing people. So you do have a little bit of an element of that, and I think a responsibility to acknowledge that as a thing, because eventually you can't lock everybody up. Okay, so if you're saying, all right, well, there is an argument to be said that when you're light on crime, there's a degradation of society degrades, and I think you could make that case without a doubt. But then you can, eventually you can't lock everybody up. So eventually you got to look and say, well, how can we, I think that it's a twofold thing. I think you have to look at what's a crime that shouldn't be a crime, or what's a crime that should really be a misdemeanor, and maybe it's a step above, or something like that. I think you can and should be harder on repeat offenders, and I think you can and should be harder on especially violent. I don't think anybody that's sane in the least bit thinks that violent criminals should be given a leash that's any longer than you have to by the Constitution.
Yeah, but the problem is our politicians then change and redo crimes. And so, this is no longer a violent offense. And so this is now a nonviolent offense. And they just changed the name. And so they've done that a lot in California. And so that's just the name game, name change. And so, but I think your point is good.
Well, like what? I'm not sure I understand what you're saying.
So look at Prop 47 in California. So they reclassified certain felonies to misdemeanors. And the argument at the time was, we're penalizing people and they can't find jobs. And if we just reclassify this from a felony to a misdemeanor, they'll still have to answer for their crime, but then they'll be able to find jobs. And then
which is a problem for people that reform.
Wait a minute. Once the passed, then the prosecutors in the urban areas, like LA, some of them decided, well, we're no longer going to prosecute these crimes at all. So they went from felonies to misdemeanors to no longer being crimes. The best example, the one that's gotten the most headlines, is theft under $950. Suddenly
that's an issue in Chicagoland.
Well, suddenly you've got stores that can't withstand $25,000 a day of shoplifting, and then you've got crime running amok around that area, and then you've got drug crimes, and so then you've got your commercial property values just dropping like a stone, and so. And then, when the mayors start noticing it is when their tax base starts dropping.
Well, that exact issue in Chicago right now is they're talking about suing, I think it's Walgreens as a corporation, because they're just, and they're creating food deserts, which then creates an even bigger problem.
They're creating food. Who's creating food deserts? Is it the companies that refuse to lose money, or is it the government who refuses to enforce the laws that are already to provide public safety? Who's
A
creating?
combination of the two. I'm not saying that it's their fault. I'm not saying that I blame them for doing it. I'm not saying that. I'm
I
just
mean,
saying
why would you
that
even?
it does create a
Then why
spot where
would
they
you
have
have?
more
I mean,
trouble,
do they
which
have
then
a public
becomes other problems.
responsibility to have a Walgreens in an area where it's not safe? I mean, that's what you're saying when they're talking about suing Walgreens because they don't have a Walgreens in this area.
Well, I'm not saying I agree with it.
Yeah.
I don't
I
agree
mean,
with it.
that's
I'm
just
saying that that's
passing the
something that
buck.
they've done.
Yeah, that's just passing the buck.
Yeah.
And then you've got Mamdani saying, well, if they won't have a store, we'll operate a store. But if they're not going to do anything and they're going to just steal from that store, then how's that going to be different? The government's going to run it better? No, the government never runs anything better. I mean, I think you do have some good points, though. When the pendulum swings too far to the left, we're too soft on crime, crime goes up. The public's never going to stand for that. When the pendulum swings too far to the right, then the argument is we need to hold everybody until trial. And that's very expensive. The public's not going to pay for that. So we have to find some kind of middle ground. The middle ground is the private industry providing oversight and supervision and getting people to court. There's nothing that compares to their low failure to appear rate, which is less than 10%. If you want people to go to court, you should be relying upon the private industry. But that's not going to happen in Illinois right now because they have decided to swing to the far left. And the citizens are reaping the, not benefits, they're reaping the results of that.
Yeah. Well, that's why so many people do come to Indiana. That is one of the reasons, because we're right over the border and, we call them FIPS. So I'll let you figure out what that stands for. But they come in and then they try to change all the government in all the negative ways,
That's
Now,
interesting
again,
because the people that have been coming to Texas have continued to vote the way Texas votes. I mean, Texas is a conservative state, has always been a conservative state, even when it was a Democrat state. The only reason why Texas is not competitive today is because there's no room in the Democrat Party for conservatives anymore. I mean, they don't have room for conservatives. They could win Texas as conservatives. Instead, they put up somebody they claim is a moderate, and then they raise a bunch of money. And then once the primary is over, we start seeing quotes from them, statements they've made, videos of them saying far left, kooky things, and then they're disqualified from being able to win the election.
Yeah.
The Republicans are winning by 13 points generally in a statewide election, and it's because they don't put up conservatives, not true conservatives. There's not any.
And see, that's one of the reasons, kind of coming full circle why we got out of the two-party system. And I think more and more people need to do that and elect actual people instead of either Republicans or Democrats. That's, I'm running as a libertarian candidate. I'm involved in the Libertarian Party. I would encourage, I think that it needs to be almost more of a parliamentary system. Something big needs to change because we can't afford it. We can't afford as a country to just keep, in my opinion, to keep kind of dragging a broken leg and trying to run this race with the rest of the world. We're
what do the libertarians believe? What do the libertarians believe? I mean, the libertarian viewpoint would have supported Oregon decriminalizing all hard drugs.
Yes. I think that there's a good argument to be had for that. I don't think that Oregon worked out. I think there's a number of ways. I think we could do another hour on that.
But it seems like Oregon is a good example of how that failed.
It's a very small sample. I think there's a lot of arguments to be had that by legalizing drugs as a nation, you would end up with a better outcome than what we have now. And what does that better outcome look like? Does it look like blowing up drug boats? Does it look like, going after and putting people for small amounts of drugs into a system and making them spend 10 years of their life? And that not being employable. I mean, those are all real world issues. And I'm not saying that there's not different bills that you could do. I'm not saying that I have all the answers off the tip of my tongue right now. You know what I mean? I didn't think we were going to get that far down the
rabbit hole.
Down the rabbit hole. But yeah, as a libertarian, my school of thought is I start with how can we possibly do this without having the government?
Haven't we seen that with marijuana in California? I mean, that's another really good example where they tried to legalize marijuana and they were going to raise all these taxes. And now essentially,
and a lot of states are.
And essentially they're spending all that tax money now to try to take out the black markets that are essentially taking over the market. I mean, the drug dispensaries are filing bankruptcy in California, and the black market's taken over. So the arguments that you're making about why we should legalize all illegal drugs, I mean, they tried that on marijuana in California, and it, I would say, absolutely failed.
Well, a couple things real quick. In Illinois and Michigan, it's actually been quite successful. They've brought in trillions of dollars. And if there is a black market for something, if it's legal, then it's not a black market. They're just making it. They're just
No,
doing
they're
it
doing it
themselves,
illegally, and they're not paying taxes, which is the whole argument behind making it legal.
which is why taxation is theft. And which is why you need to, which brings us full circle to, all right, well, let's figure out what we're going to cut and what absolutely is necessary for the government to be involved in. Do I think that it's smart to do heroin? Absolutely not. Would I ever do it? No. I don't think that by
Are you
making it
really going to
inherently
argue that
illegal.
somebody has a constitutional right to overdose on heroin if they want to?
Sure.
Who?
Honestly, that's I'll just be honest. I think you have a constitutional right to put a gun against your head right now if you want to. I don't think suicide should be illegal. I think that it's stupid, but I don't think
No,
I'm
how
God.
is
I don't think
suicide
I'm your mom.
illegal? I mean, you kill yourself, you're not. They can't prosecute you.
They do. It happens
They
when
can't.
people fail suicide. So, hey, this is future editing, Travis. You're wrong, Travis. You're right, Travis. But you're right in that there are a couple of states still, South Carolina, North Carolina, South Carolina, New York City, and which isn't a state, it's a city, obviously, and Maryland, that still have it on the book where it's technically suicide is an unlawful act, and New York City calls it a grave public wrong, so it's still on the book as being against the law. Not nearly as much as you just implied, though, and also not in the spirit of the point you were trying to make, past Travis. So I just want to correct that because all's fair is fair. So, but there are other better examples that I could have had brought up, but regardless, carry on. Look it up. I'm not kidding. I'm not being.
If they're
cheeky.
successful at suicide, they can't prosecute you because you're dead.
Attempted, or they call it attempted suicide. That's a thing. It's illegal in many states to try to commit suicide. It really is. I'm not being cheeky, and I'm not saying that this is like an epidemic that's sweeping the nation. I'm just giving it as an example. You know what I mean? I do. I think that you should have absolute liberty and autonomy over your body. I think that that's a good starting
Let's take
spot.
that logic, though. If you have the autonomy over your body, then you have the autonomy to be a pedophile if you want. I mean,
because I'm harming another person.
Well, wait a minute. You're drawing the line. You're drawing the line there, but you take your logic to the extreme. If I have autonomy, then I can do whatever I want with my body, and if I can convince a kid to do it with me, and
I have autonomy of my body. I don't have autonomy of your body, which means I can't do anything to you that is within.
Well, wait a minute. If I agree with it, then it's just both of us have agreed, and we have autonomy of our body. So where do you draw the line?
You're not an adult, so you don't have if it's a child, you're not an adult and you don't have autonomy.
Well, where do we draw the line of being an adult? We hear from the far left.
That's where you draw.
Whoa, let me finish. We hear from the far left that we can't punish people until they're over 26, or because their brain hasn't fully developed at 26. And then at the same time, we hear the same group of people argue that children should be allowed to mutilate their body for the transgender stuff, and permanently change it so it can never be the same, but that's okay for little kids. I mean, we have absolutely contradictory arguments, and I mean, I just point out the contradiction.
None of that is contradictory. If you are 8, and I do think that if you're 18 or whatever, pick a number, whatever age you're an adult, you can say 18. If you want to say 26, that's fine, but then you shouldn't be able to be drafted until you're 26. And wherever you draw the line for being able to be drafted, wherever you draw the line to me, once you're an adult, and there you go. You have your autonomy. I think we've traditionally called it 18.
What's the city in the Bible? Something in Gomorrah.
Sodom and Gomorrah.
Sodom and Gomorrah. I mean, I just think that's what I go to. So Sodom and Gomorrah would be fine. Could be the capital of the United States, and that'd be fine. And I don't agree with that. I mean, we've got to have
Why? How do you think Washington D.C. is in Sodom
Well,
and
maybe
Gomorrah right
Washington
now?
D.C. is our Sodom and Gomorrah, and that's the reason why they had to pull out ICE and to make it more safe. I mean, look at what the governor of New York did years and years ago. You know, we all hate him now, but he had the broken windows theory, and using that, New York became much safer. And so it became so safe that the activists attacked the theory, and it's a theory that we teach in our colleges about how to police. And so it is a recognized theory, and you know, they weren't doing anything new and novel. They were just exercising what we know and how to decrease crime. And they were attacked for it and litigated about it. And eventually, after they stopped doing it, the Supreme Court said it was fine. Well, of course it's fine. It's a recognized theory. So, I mean, it's just the period that we live in is everything is so hyper politicized. It's impossible to find common ground.
Yeah. Well, I don't think, but I don't think that it is, because I think you can have conversations. The problem is, and what a lot of people that are involved in Republican and Democrat politics hate, is that it's easier to find common ground if you're able to sit down and have, we're at minute 56 and we're having a debate. We don't agree on a lot of stuff. There's a few things we do agree on, and so this is how you find good government, right? You have theories and you go back and forth and you have two educated people have a discussion, right? So I mean, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that the Fox Newses and the CNNs and the MSNBCs of the world don't like it, because they don't like the fact that we're not doing this right here and in sound bites this big, so you can't get any points across, right? They do these panels and they only do these little 1 minute, 30-second segments, so you're not able to flush out your ideas. You hear, this is bad, this is good, this is bad, this is
Yeah,
good.
but we're
We're flushing out the ideas, which I think is what's important and what the internet is bringing back, and that's why you're seeing so much more political discourse, is just knowledge.
Well, we're living in a time with the in the criminal justice world where I think you can't. It's hard to find common ground because the activists, the far left activists, can't admit what they're doing is wrong. So what they're pushing the politicians to, and so when something doesn't work, they won't admit it. And so it's very difficult to find the common ground with them currently. And if you were to, if you were to if you were an elected official and came from an urban area, and you were to come to this format, and we were to come to an agreement that we found this middle ground, the response to you would be, you have to change what you just said, or we're going to put up an opponent to run against you in the next election.
Exactly. That's
And
why the two-party system sucks,
and
because that's
so
exactly what they do.
you can't find common ground when one party won't admit something's not working. I mean, I think on the issue of crime, one party will admit when something is working in broad brushes, but the other side will not admit it. And so that makes it very difficult because they're pushing theories, they're pushing soft on crime policies that are making things worse, but they won't admit it. I mean, the best example is, October before the election, they were saying, oh, you don't have to believe us, just look at the FBI statistics. And then suddenly the FBI statistics were updated, showing crime was going up. And suddenly they didn't want to talk crime anymore. They just wanted to yell at the top of their lungs that Trump is a Hitler, Trump is a tyrant.
Yeah. Again, I agree with you on all of that. I think that that's exactly why, why you take the power back away from, it's, if it shouldn't be a coin flip. When you look at statistically, I think the latest numbers I saw was that 45% of the US as a whole is unaffiliated with either of the two major parties. That's almost half. Split the other half off, they're the majority at this point. So yeah, I do think that, I've had a good number of, I was on my town council. So it's funny because I was on my town council as the youngest elected Republican in a Democrat town. I was in a union at the time. I was a steel worker, and they ended up putting me, the police in town actually had kind of a bad reputation because they were known to pull people over kind of willy-nilly, and it was very small town politics, very nicky-nack stuff. Hey, you got a tail light out, you go around, the tail light's actually on, just very, very small town cop stuff. And so they actually put me on I was the police commissioner, basically, for Hebron, very small town. So it wasn't much, it wasn't like I was a commissioner, it was very, very small Northwest Indiana town. And so one of the things, most of the cops that we brought on during that time have now, over the years, left being police officers. And I'll tell you, I've talked to each of them. It's probably been about 10. And it's about a 50-50 split, is that half of them feel like they got tired of basically being toll collectors. They didn't want to have to pull somebody over for 5 miles. They got tired of having a requirement of number of tickets to have to write, because then they have to pull people over for kind of nicky-knack stuff, and that wasn't what they signed on to be a police officer to do. They wanted to come on because they wanted to protect and serve, and they didn't feel like as officers they were protecting and serve. Now the other half were a little more in lines of you, like, oh, it doesn't make any sense if for me to arrest somebody and put them in jail when they're going to be back out on the street on the next day. So I finally just couldn't do it anymore. And, there's so much cop hate out there that I left. And I think both are probably, those are both their experiences. It's been about 50%, from what I've known. Obviously, I'm a small sample size. But I just think that's also something. So, I kind of look at it
so
from
that's
both
50%. I mean, if you could just get it the 25%, or get it down to the ones that don't want to write tickets, and get the other side where they feel like they're being supported by their local officials, because what they're really saying when they tell you, that they don't feel like they can arrest anybody, they don't feel like they've got the support of the
Right,
elected officials,
right.
and that's true. I mean,
Yep.
especially in a lot of our urban cities, where they're being pushed, and that's a backdoor way of criminal justice reform, where you put so much pressure on them where they don't feel confident that they're going to get the support to even arrest. I mean, crime goes down, or does it really? The statistics go down, and who does that help? Oh, wait, who does it hurt? The very same minorities that we say we're
Right.
trying to help. They're the ones that get hurt the worst, because, uh, fif- what is the 50% of all murder victims right now is young black males, and who's the one that's generally, by and large, doing the killing? Young black males. And somehow in this debate, we've decided to favor the young black male murderer over the young black male person who was killed.
Well, I don't know that. I mean, that would fall into violent crime. So, I mean, I don't think that, again, I know that there's an element of that to the left. I don't want to discount that. But I definitely don't think that that's, I think that that's without a doubt, kind of going back to what you just said, though, is that a lot of them, they feel like they don't have any support. And some of them that they don't feel like they have any support because there's such a cop hate. Well, there's a certain point in time where you stop pulling over the 80-year-old farmer, for going 5 miles over the speed limit, and you just keep writing them tickets because you're required to write X number of tickets every month. So then if you don't have the support, so I'm saying focus in on the violent crime, right? Get away from all the ticky-tacky stuff and the stuff, kind of, again, coming full circle, what we had said at the very beginning of not, I think you need a lot of law reform. Should things be, should you have the police that the ones that I talked to said they basically felt like they were just a toll. They were just there to make sure that they brought money into their government, right? I don't know. Like, I guess it depends on how you look at it. So, but no, I know I've got time. I know you said you had 45 minutes to an hour. I appreciate you coming on. I'll give you last word and give you a chance to talk. I think this has been fun. I'd love to have you back. I'd love to do more stuff like this, because I think that there's a lot of credence to what you're talking about, even if we don't agree on everything. I think it's been a fun discussion, and like I said, I'll give you last word.
Well, first, let me give a shout out to Indiana. I have a daughter. My youngest daughter's 21. When she was 5 years old, she had a bone marrow transplant. She was born with a very rare condition. She did not make platelets. And so it was a condition that's supposed to change after a year, but somewhere around year 5, she nosedived. And so they told us she needed a bone marrow transplant. And our donor was a senior at a college in Indiana. And she skipped a final to go donate her bone marrow so she could give my daughter the gift of life. And
That's
today
awesome.
her
That's awesome.
platelets are normal. And we've met this person and met their family, and they're great people. And so I would give a shout out to Indiana and thank you for doing something I couldn't do. I mean, one of the most helpless times of my life is when your daughter is going through a bone marrow transplant and there's nothing you can do, and you have to rely completely on the kindness of strangers. And because you can't even meet them until a year after the bone marrow transplant. So you don't even know who they are. And so there's no worse feeling in the world, or there wasn't for me. So I would start by saying, thank you, Indiana. Thank you for raising great people. Thank you for being a part of the country. Thank you for being part of the Be the Match program, is what it was called at the time. Other than that, if people want to know more information about me, they can go to our website, pbtx.com, the Professional Bondsmen of Texas.com. We have a blog where we highlight important criminal justice stories, but we also have our own podcasts. There's a link on the menu, or you can just go directly to the website, thebellpost.com.
Okay.
We just talk about crime, what's criminal justice reform, what doesn't work, what does. The best example that I have right now is, we hear all this information about we need to defund the police and that'll make us safer. And there's actually studies on that, and that doesn't make us safer. Crime goes up dramatically.
Yeah, no, I'm 110% with you on
And
that.
still we hear from the AOCs of the world that we need to defund the police and we'll be safer. No, it's an absolute lie. It's just a talking point. But that's it. I've really appreciated it. I think I'm leaving and driving 4 hours, so I'm
Yeah. No. Thank you so much. Like I said, I know we're already 6 minutes over what you got.
No
I'm
problem.
serious. I want to have this on again. And when Keith comes on, if you have another major topic, please. This has been fun. I enjoy. It's not fun when you have somebody on that's just like, so I believe in this. Yes, me too. You don't have a show if you agree on everything. So hey, thank you again so much. I don't know. Do you have YouTube? I'll connect you on YouTube if you have a YouTube.
Yeah, we
channel.
have a YouTube channel. There's on our website. So yeah.
Perfect.
All right.
I'll connect it on there. Well, hey, thank you so much. My name's Travis Gearhart. This is Disenfranchised. Thank you so much, Ken Good. And we'll talk to you guys soon. Peace.
Bye. Peace.